welcome to Culture on I-24 News. I'm Oded Grober. Thank you so much for joining me. Today on our show, we'll talk to the author of the novel A Remarkable Kindness. We'll discover the International Center for Cave Arts being built in France. And discuss some critically acclaimed movies snubbed by the Oscars. Diana Blatter is an author who lives in the north of Israel. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Huffington Post. Her latest novel, A Remarkable Kindness, was published late last year, and I'm very happy to have her here in the studio to tell us all about it. Thanks for coming in, Diana.
Thank you, Oded. I'm happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about this book, A Remarkable Kindness.
It's a novel about 4 American women who all moved to Israel for various reasons, and they're members of a Jaffa Port, a burial society, in a village similar to the village where I live in Shevet.
Okay, so an American woman moved to Israel, lives in the north of Israel. It sounds similar to someone who just might be here.
That's correct. I'm a member also of the Jaffa Port. I translate it as a burial circle, even though it's literally translated as a burial society or a holy society because it closes the circle of life. And in our village, the Jaffa Port is all voluntary, and we perform this as a loving act of kindness because it's considered the greatest mitzvah or the greatest deed that you can do for somebody because a dead person can never thank you.
It is a very interesting backdrop for any story, I would imagine. How you ended up doing it? How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it for about 15 years. When I moved to this village in Shevet, not many people want to do this ritual, and I took it on because I thought it would be a very beautiful ritual and a way to honor women from the village who I know. They're my neighbors and friends.
Right. It's it does sound like a very special thing that you put yourself through. Now you live in Israel, but you write in English. How does that work? Do you see yourself as something of an outsider here?
Well, I'm certainly an American, and when you hear me when I speak in Hebrew, everybody knows I'm an outsider. But I feel very much a part of this country, and I'm very proud to be an Israeli American or an American Israeli.
And what's it like being an American Israeli or an Israeli American?
Well, I still think that I'm a wandering Jew, and even though I'm in Israel, I still see the world through Jewish eyes, not necessarily through American eyes or Israeli eyes, but my own special perspective.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit before the show, and I read up, preparing for this interview, and I saw that you did move around a little bit. You lived in many places. What was it about northern Israel that you decided to settle down there?
Well, I love the sea. I love living by the sea. And when I lived in Rome, actually I worked as a freelance journalist there, and I met a journalist from Israel, Noah Klieger, who writes for Yediot, and we were both covering a story about Russian Jews who were not going to Israel but going to other places. And Noah was very upset about that. And I said to him, one day I'm going to get to Israel. And that was in 1980. It took me another 11 years, but I managed to get here.
Right. And you moved from being a journalist to writing novels as well, right?
I still do journalism.
Oh, okay. Now, you published books before that. One of them is a very interesting looking book, a memoir of yours titled
The Mom Who Took Off on Her Motorcycle. And it's a story of my husband on his motorcycle, and I went on my motorcycle, and we left from New York and traveled all the way up to Alaska.
Wow.
And back again on 2 motorcycles and lived to tell the tale.
Wow, what's the distance there?
It was 15,000 kilometers.
Wow. And what brought that on?
Well, my husband Johnny and I have 6 children together, and the youngest was leaving the house, and we were faced with an empty nest, and I thought I wanted to do something special. So I got an assignment from the New York Times to write about a glacier up there, and I said, well, let's just ride our motorcycles up there.
That is very cool, I have to say. I wish I could do it at some point. Now, another interesting fact is that that book was self-published.
Correct.
And this book, A Remarkable Kindness, was published at a small publishing house called HarperCollins. So how did that happen?
Well, I wanted to publish The Mom Who Took Off on a Motorcycle with a big publisher, but people said that nobody wanted to read about a Jewish mother taking off on a motorcycle.
But they want to read about 4 Jewish women working for Jaffa Kadisha in northern Israel?
I guess so. I guess it appealed to them. I guess the idea that by being so close to death makes people appreciate being alive. And that's only what happened to me. Rather than something that would be morbid or would make me depressed, after every time I participate in this moving ritual, I think, I'm alive. It's so wonderful to be alive and standing up, and that's what
I mean, we should say this is not a depressing book.
Well, part of it is sad because it takes place. Part of it takes place during the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah, and one of our sons was wounded in that war. So there is sadness, obviously, but it's I hope a joyful book and a remarkable kindness and an affirmation of life.
Exactly my thoughts. Now, you mentioned the 4 children that you have, right?
Well, I have 4, and my husband has 2 children, and we adopted unofficially.
There's a story in your home life as well.
Right. We heard about a young Ethiopian woman who kind of needed help, and so we sort of took her in unofficially, and she became the 7th child, and now she's happily living
6
in.
just isn't enough.
Right. Happily living in Rishon.
That's great. What's next for you?
I'm working on a novel that's set in the Lower East Side in New York in the early 1900s, which is where my grandparents had lived when they first moved to Israel to New York from Russia.
I often confuse the two also. Diana, it sounds super interesting. I'm looking forward to it. And once again, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much, Oded.
Moving on now. The International Center for Cave Arts is being constructed these days in France. When finished towards the end of the year, it will be an exact replica of the Lascaux Caves, which will allow visitors to explore the prehistoric site as the actual cave is closed to the public. More in this report.
Drilling, hammering, it could be any old building site. But this is more than just old. It's prehistoric. After 3 years of work, artists are putting the finishing touches to a full-scale replica of the Lascaux Caves. The Dordogne Caves have been closed to the public since 1963. The future replica will be recreated in 46 segments, making up a wall measuring nearly 10,000 square feet.
The mineral detail that you see on the wall is all modeling. The grain, the details, the veins, the engravings. Absolutely all the mineral work you see on the wall has been engraved, worked and sculpted, chiseled by hand, with little paintbrushes and tools used in the field of dentistry.
The workers begin by molding a polystyrene casing, which is then used to make the resin and mineral walls. Each block is then handed to expert craftsmen who bring the prehistoric masterpiece to life.
We're going to slap on a coat of makeup, if you may. I apply liquid made from natural pigments, yellow ochres mixed with darker colors like umber. It's all a process. You go from one small detail, and when you look around the walls, your gaze must not land on anything which isn't natural.
To make the replica with millimeter precision, a digital scan of the original cave was projected onto the walls. Using the scan like tracing paper, with lamps and projectors to simulate daylight, the workers were able to paint the walls. A far cry from the prehistoric methods of fat-burning lamps and rudimentary scaffolding. In this room, workers are putting the finishing touches to the Great Hall of the Bulls, Lascaux's most iconic mural. Although it's 17 meters long, the smallest details are studied.
We try to understand them really, to understand how and why they were painted this way. But time has also taken its toll, and these animals don't look the way they would have when they were painted. 19,000 years have gone by and have affected and damaged these paintings. Time has had a visible impact, so we must also recreate that.
The Lascaux Four Caves Museum is being built on the hill where the caves were discovered in 1940. The replica's individual parts will be delivered and assembled at the site, their spiritual home.
In a moment, we'll see which films the Academy missed this year. But first, here's our cultural recommendation for today.
The Museum of Contemporary Art in Oslo presents the work of Art Anna Bergman. The artist used an intricate method employing metal foils, scraping the surface, and using various glazes to create depth in her graphic forms. Her work is inspired by her home country of Norway, even though she spent most of her life in France. Norway's natural scenes, fjords and mountains, as well as the Nordic light, inspired her simple geometrical shapes. In the early 1950s, her pictures reached their most abstract, and she created an idiom with a handful of archetypal motifs: rocks, celestial bodies, mountains, fjords, horizons, and boats.
Avril Lindsby is joining me in the studio, and he is not happy with the Academy.
I did not receive an Oscar nomination this year. Again, can you believe
They snubbed you again.
And I'm a white guy.
No shame?
I'm a white
and
guy.
you're a white guy.
Yeah.
As
So-
white as they come.
The Academy has been under a barrage of people saying that they're racist and that they don't support black people.
And you're happy to jump on that bandwagon.
We're happy to jump. With our first movie, we're talking about movies that haven't received nominations, or not enough nominations, that have been like critical darlings this year. And we begin with Beasts of No Nation, a movie by Cary Fukunaga, who we know is the director of the first season of True Detective, who's now moved into feature films. And it's a hard movie to swallow. It's about a child
powerful
soldier
film,
in
yeah.
Africa, received rave reviews. And some think that the only reason that it didn't receive nominations is not because the stars are black.
It's timing.
It came out on Netflix, and we think that the Academy are not happy about that. It was bought by Netflix. It was supposed to have a theatrical. It had a small theatrical release
Just to make it
eligible, but it did not receive a very powerful, very important film.
It also came out a little earlier in the year, and those
It did
films
come out.
tend
Yeah,
to,
they fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
They need to come out in the fall.
Yeah.
Our next movie, also sort of out of left field, a movie called Tangerine, the first movie ever to be filmed wholly on an iPhone. And
Okay.
and another,
so maybe not a cinematography.
not a cinematography
nominee.
award.
Yeah.
And the other remarkable thing about it is it stars a transgender woman, Kitana Kiki Rodriguez. But again, a movie that was much loved. You know, it's sort of groundbreaking in the way it portrays transgender women, and also in the fact that it was filmed on an iPhone, with a skeleton crew of very few people. You know, as indie as it gets.
Made headlines.
It definitely
and
made
rightly
headlines
so.
and did not receive any mention from the Academy. Love and Mercy was a movie I really loved this year. It's about Brian Wilson.
I felt kind of merciful towards him.
It's a movie about Brian Wilson and sort of his successes and sort of the problems he had in his
John
life.
Cusack doing a good
John
good
Cusack
job there.
and Paul Dano both playing the character in various times in his life. I loved this movie. It was really good, and I certainly expected them. It has great music, and I certainly expected them to get nominations, at least in the acting roles, but that was not to be. Another movie that we thought would get acting nominations for it, white stars, was The End of the Tour, where Jason Segel plays famed author David Foster Wallace. It's a very small film. Jesse Eisenberg does a nice role as the author, the journalist who interviews him about on his book tour. You know, Jason Segel is like the most remarkable thing in this movie. His performance. It's like I said, a very sort of small movie. Also didn't get acting nominations. Another movie that was surprising that it didn't get a lot of nominations was Sicario. It's It was a crime drama about sort of the drug war currently in America.
Also a very powerful film.
Also a very powerful film. It's sort of, you expect an action film, but it's a very taut thriller about real life sort of happenings with a very strong performance by Emily Blunt in the title role. People have called it the best movie about the drug trade since Traffic.
Yeah,
but but we didn't
They
hear
are
about
often
that.
mentioned together.
Yeah.
Last
one, we have Carol from Todd Haynes, starring Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, and we didn't see that one as well. We saw Kate Blanchett, but not the movie.
Yeah. Too bad, but at least we liked them. Thank you, Avli.
Thank you.
Thank you at home for watching us as well. We'll be back next week, and until then, catch our best of edition. See you next week. Bye.